Hey everyone. Tonight, I'm sharing a real spine-chilling story from Reddit. If you love horror, hit subscribe for more terrifying tales. Now, let's dive in. Don't watch this alone. Maria had always dreamt of a quiet life for her and her 6-month-old daughter, Lily. After her divorce, the small suburban house felt like a fresh start, a place where she could finally breathe again. The house was perfect, with sunlight streaming through the large windows and a cozy nursery she'd decorated with pastel colors and stuffed animals. But it wasn't long before Maria began to notice strange things. The first night in the house, while setting up the baby monitor, she heard a faint crackle of static. She chalked it up to interference and turned the volume down. As the days passed, the static grew louder, sometimes accompanied by faint whispers that she dismissed as audio feedback. One night, as she rocked Lily to sleep, the monitor came to life. "Your baby is crying," a voice whispered. Maria froze. She looked down at Lily, peacefully sleeping in her arms. The next morning, Maria dismissed the incident as a fluke. Maybe she was overtired and imagining things. She decided to swap the monitor for a newer model, but even with the replacement, the whispers continued. "Don't let him in tonight," the voice whispered one evening, just as Maria was locking up the house. She bolted the doors, her hands shaking. Was someone hacking into the monitor? She checked every window and door twice before retreating to her bedroom, her paranoia growing with every passing hour. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the monitor crackled again. "He's already inside." Maria barely slept that night. Every sound in the house felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the rustle of the curtains, the hum of the refrigerator. She finally drifted off in the early hours of the morning, only to be awakened by Lily's cries. Rushing to the nursery, she found the crib empty. Panic gripped her chest, but before she could scream, she saw Lily sitting on the floor, playing with a stuffed bear. The monitor on the dresser whispered faintly, "You're running out of time." She grabbed Lily and left the nursery, locking the door behind her. Maria spent the next day researching the history of the house. She discovered it had once belonged to a family that mysteriously disappeared decades ago. Neighbors spoke of strange occurrences, and some even claimed the house was cursed. Determined to find answers, Maria searched every inch of the house. In the basement, behind an old cabinet, she discovered a hidden door. It led to a dark, damp tunnel that smelled of earth and decay. The walls were covered in strange markings, and at the end of the tunnel was a small room with a crude altar. On the altar sat a collection of old baby toys and photographs of infants, their faces scratched out. That night, the whispers became more frantic. "Protect her," they urged. "He's coming for her." Maria stayed awake, cradling Lily, her heart pounding with fear. Around midnight, the lights in the house flickered and the temperature plummeted. She heard heavy footsteps coming from the basement, followed by a low guttural growl. She locked the bedroom door and held Lily tightly, praying for dawn. But the footsteps grew louder, closer, until they stopped right outside her door. The monitor crackled. "Don't let him take her." Summoning her courage, Maria grabbed a kitchen knife and opened the door. The hallway was empty, but the air was thick with an oppressive presence. She followed the sounds to the basement, clutching Lily to her chest. In the tunnel, she came face to face with the entity. A towering, shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. It moved toward her, its skeletal hands reaching out for Lily. The whispers from the monitor filled the room, growing louder and louder until they became a deafening roar. "Use the light," they commanded. Maria remembered her phone's flashlight and turned it on, shining it directly at the entity. It recoiled with a shriek, disappearing into the shadows. After the encounter, Maria researched the symbols she had seen in the basement. They were part of an ancient ritual meant to summon a dark spirit that fed on the souls of children. The spirit had been bound to the house, using the baby monitor as a way to manipulate its victims. The whispers, she realized, came from the spirit of another mother who had lost her child to the entity. This ghost had been trying to protect Lily all along. Maria knew she couldn't stay in the house, but the entity wouldn't let them leave so easily. That night, it attacked again, its rage shaking the very walls of the house. Maria fought back with every ounce of courage she had, using light and the protective symbols she'd learned to banish the entity. As dawn broke, the house fell silent. Maria and Lily escaped, leaving the cursed house behind. But as they drove away, the baby monitor crackled one last time. "Thank you," the whisper said. Maria never looked back. Emma had never believed in curses. She scoffed at the stories the old caretaker, Mr. Willis, told her when she arrived at her aunt's countryside house for the summer. The place was idyllic, with rolling green hills and a quiet stillness that city life never afforded her. But one thing stood out: the ancient stone well in the backyard. It was covered with moss, and a rusted iron grate was bolted over the top. "Don't look into the well at night," Mr. Willis warned her one evening. His weathered hands trembled as he spoke. "That's when they stare back." Emma had laughed, brushing it off as an old man's superstition. But something about the way he avoided the well, never even glancing at it, left her unsettled. Curiosity got the better of her. That night, armed with a flashlight and her camera, Emma approached the well. The air around it was colder, and the crickets that filled the night with their song fell silent as she got closer. The grate was heavy, but loose enough to slide aside. She shined her flashlight into the dark abyss, half expecting to see nothing but water at the bottom. Instead, she saw a reflection, her own face, but distorted. And behind her, another face. She whipped around, but there was no one there. When she turned back to the well, the water rippled, and the faces were gone. Emma couldn't shake the image from her mind. She checked the photos on her camera the next morning, and sure enough, there it was. A blurry, pale face staring back from the well. She showed the picture to Mr. Willis, but he refused to look. "I warned you," he said. "The well doesn't just reflect what's there. It shows what it wants to take." Emma dismissed his cryptic words. She was determined to figure out what was really going on. That night she returned to the well. This time the water was still, but faint whispers seemed to emanate from the depths. Emma started researching the history of the house and the well. What she found was chilling. Over the past century, numerous people, mostly children and young women, had disappeared from the village. Locals believed the well was cursed, a portal to something dark and hungry. In the library, Emma found an old ledger of missing persons. One entry caught her attention: a girl named Eleanor, who had disappeared in 1923. The name seemed familiar, but Emma couldn't place it. That night, the whispers from the well grew louder, calling her name. Emma. Emma. Unable to resist, Emma leaned over the well again. This time the water wasn't still. It churned and bubbled as if boiling. Faces began to emerge, one by one. Some were blank and expressionless, while others wore twisted, agonized expressions. And then she saw her own face again. But this time, it wasn't a reflection. It was staring up at her, mouthing the word, "Help." Terrified, Emma stepped back, but a sudden, invisible force pulled her toward the well. She grabbed onto the edge, screaming, as the whispers turned into a deafening roar. Emma managed to pull herself free and ran back to the house. She confronted Mr. Willis, demanding answers. He reluctantly revealed the truth. The well was a gateway used by an ancient cult to sacrifice souls in exchange for power. The faces Emma saw were the victims, trapped forever in the depths of the well. "But why me?" Emma asked. "Because you're one of them," Mr. Willis said. "Your great-grandmother was Eleanor. She was taken by the well, but the curse skipped a generation. Now it wants you." The whispers became relentless, following Emma everywhere she went. They invaded her dreams, filling them with cold, dark water and countless hands pulling her down. Unable to take it anymore, Emma returned to the well one final time. She was determined to end the curse. Armed with a rope and a lantern, she climbed down into the darkness. At the bottom, she found an underground chamber filled with skeletal remains and strange symbols carved into the walls. The faces from the water began to appear, swirling around her. The spirits whispered, "Free us." Emma realized the only way to break the curse was to destroy the well from within. She used the lantern to set fire to the chamber, the flames consuming the dark symbols. The faces screamed in unison, a sound that echoed through her very soul. As the fire grew, the ground beneath her began to collapse. Hands reached out from the darkness, pulling her down. She fought, but the pull was too strong. The last thing she saw was her own face in the water, staring back at her with a knowing smile. When the villagers found the well the next day, it had caved in completely. Emma was never seen again, but the whispers stopped, and no more people went missing. Some say Emma freed the spirits trapped in the well. Others believe she became one of them. And on quiet nights, when the wind is just right, you can still hear her voice, calling from where the well once stood. "Don't look in the water." A night like any other. Jack hated taking the bus, so he relied on rideshare apps to get around. It was late, well past midnight, and he was on his way home after a long shift at the diner. When he opened the app to request a ride, the car pulled up almost immediately, before the app had even confirmed a driver. The driver was a man in his 40s with a wide, unsettling grin. "For Jack, right?" he asked. His voice was cheerful, but something about his tone made Jack hesitate. Yeah," Jack replied, sliding into the back seat. As the car started moving, Jack realized something odd. The app wasn't tracking the ride. At first, the ride seemed normal enough. The driver made small talk, asking about Jack's night and work, but the questions grew increasingly personal. "Do you live alone, Jack? Got any family around?" Jack laughed nervously. Just me and my cat." The driver's smile widened. "Nice. Quiet. I like quiet." The car took a turn Jack didn't recognize. He glanced at his phone, but the app still showed no ride in progress. "Hey, I think you missed a turn," Jack said. The driver didn't respond. Instead, he hummed an unfamiliar tune, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the steering wheel. Jack's unease grew as the car drove deeper into an industrial area, far from his neighborhood. Seriously, where are we going? Jack asked, his voice rising. The driver finally spoke, his tone unnervingly calm. We're taking a little detour. Don't worry, it'll all make sense soon. As the driver spoke, Jack noticed something horrifying. Scratch marks on the inside of the car door, as if someone had clawed at it in desperation. Panicking, Jack reached for the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The locks were engaged. Relax, the driver said. We're almost there. The car stopped in front of an abandoned warehouse. The driver turned to Jack, his eyes unnervingly bright in the dim light. Why don't you come inside for a bit? There's something you need to see. Jack shook his head. I'm not going anywhere with you. The driver chuckled. Suit yourself. But you're not leaving until I've shown you. As Jack frantically searched for a way to escape, he heard a faint noise, like a muffled cry, coming from the trunk. What's in the trunk? Jack demanded. The driver's grin disappeared. Don't ask questions you don't want answers to. Jack seized his chance when the driver stepped out of the car. He unlocked the door from the inside and bolted, running toward the warehouse. Inside, the air was cold and smelled of rust. The walls were lined with photographs of people, hundreds of them, their faces scratched out. In the center of the room was an old desk, covered in newspaper clippings about missing persons. A low, sinister laugh echoed through the building. Do you recognize them, Jack? The driver called out. You should. One of them is here because of you. Jack's stomach dropped. He spotted a clipping with his own face on it, linked to a hit and run years ago. The driver finally cornered Jack, his expression no longer jovial, but cold and menacing. You took a life, Jack. You left them to die in the street, and now it's time to pay. Jack stammered. It was an accident. I didn't mean to. The driver interrupted, his voice like thunder. You didn't stop. You didn't care. But they did. They cared enough to come back for you. Suddenly, the trunk of the car popped open, and a figure emerged. A shadowy, distorted version of the man Jack had killed. Jack ran, but the shadow followed, its whispers filling his ears with accusations and screams. The driver stood back, watching with a sinister smile. The shadow caught Jack, pulling him into a cold, suffocating embrace. As Jack's vision blurred, the driver's voice echoed, Don't worry, Jack. You won't be alone. The ride never ends. When Jack woke up, he was in the back seat of the car again. But this time, he was the one locked inside, and the car was already pulling up to another unsuspecting passenger. Thank you so much for staying with me till the end. If you enjoyed this story, and it sent shivers down your spine, please give this video a like. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me bring more stories like this to you. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on the next chilling tale. Your subscription inspires me to create better and scarier content just for you. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and don't forget to watch your back. See you soon.